17 questions with Bocce. 17 questions with Bocce.
All right, folks, welcome to 17 Questions with Bocce, episode 13, with special guest Kassidy. Hey, Kassidy, how
Hey,
are you doing today?
good, good. It's good to be here.
I thanks for joining. Folks had told me for the longest time,
Mhm.
you got to do some collaboration with Cassidy. You'd get along. And, we were talking offline, and I was like, we are two peas in a pod. We are very, very alike.
Absolutely. They've been telling me the same too. They're like, you have to collab with Bocce. And then we finally did, and they were so excited.
Yeah.
Well, I think our approach to things, it's very similar. And our outlook on things is very similar too. So I'm pretty convinced
And
we were
it feels
separated
like
at
it.
birth.
It's so wild. So the first question is, what lens or perspective do you bring to this case that shapes how you talk about it?
Well, I have a background in education. So whenever I watch things, I like to learn. So I love documentaries. And I mean, not just like a 45-minute documentary, I want the 8 episodes documentaries so that by the time I'm finished with it, that I know absolutely every detail about whatever it was about. That's what I like. And so when I was watching different attorneys that covered the Murdoch case, I would get frustrated because I felt like a lot of them spoke above their audience. And they would do things like live streaming the court case. So they would pause to explain things supposedly, and that's why you watch. That's
Mm-mm.
why you choose to watch a content creator instead of just live streaming the court case yourself. Or, you want their insight. You want to understand, why did this attorney object to that? Why did the judge rule the way he did? And I found that even when they would stop to talk, they weren't really helping their audience to learn. They weren't answering the questions that people had. Why? Why did they do that? What does this mean? They were just speaking lawyer speak, and it was still above people's heads. The same thing about the filings. We're all completely capable, especially like this case, because it's all for free on court listeners. So you don't have to pay for anything. Anybody can go, they can access the document, they can read it. Why come to a content creator? Because you need help to understand. So why does this say based on this rule, blah, blah, blah? What do all these words mean? What does this mean? And so I would be disappointed watching them speak over their audience and also not deep dive into the meat of things. And so I thought, that's what I want to do because that's what I want to hear. I wasn't going to waste my time watching someone who wasn't really going to help me or anybody else. And then I'm getting frustrated. I'm yelling at YouTube like a crazy person. And so I started just doing it myself and just thinking, if I can, when I approach an episode to prepare, I look through there and I think, what word might everybody, not everybody, but somebody not know? What expression? Do they know what this motion means? Do they know what this rule is? And so when I prepared an episode, I came to it with that in mind, an educational theme. I wanted to teach. I wanted to help people. Then after they've learned, people have this knowledge on their own. And I always feel like it's kind of going to be the theme to my answers to these questions, that knowledge is power. So I like to educate people so that going forward, they have something that they can take with them and be like, I learned what that means. So that next time when they try to read emotion, they can understand. They could say, I know exactly what this is
Mm,
about. And I love that. I love to be able to do that so that people can learn things for themselves.
yeah. So when people tell you that your content resonates with them, what do you think they're connecting with most?
I think we tend to be drawn to people who are like us. And one thing I've seen in this community, and I have to say, because I've covered other stories, and even before YouTube, when I was on Twitter, on Instagram, I think we find people that are similar. But I have to say that this community feels special to me. I've never seen such a wonderful community as this one. I think so many of us are similar. And I think one of the things that we have in common is that a lot of us have some sort of trauma as women. More of us than not have had some kind of trauma, or in my case, multiple lifetimes worth of traumas and after trauma. And so Oh, and another thing is
Mhm.
we're see something, say something type of people. When we see injustice, we have to speak up. We can't stand it. We want to change it. We want to do something. So I think that we're drawn to this case for the same reasons. And we're moved by things like empathy, compassion. We saw
Mm.
that someone was being harmed by a powerful person, or we see people being harmed by a powerful system, and we don't like it. And we want to do something about it. And so I think I have a lot of emotion. I have a lot of passion when I choose to talk about something. It's because it has spoken to my heart. It's something that I care a lot about. And so everything I do, and it's not for everyone, and I understand that. That's why I've never in the entire lifetime of my YouTube, I've never asked someone to like or to subscribe to my channel. I'm I'm like, this is what I do. This is how I like to do it. If you like it, join. Come and hang out with me. And if you don't like it, that's okay too. It's not just speaking my feelings. I think the people that are drawn to my channel are people that are coming from the exact same place that I'm coming from. So we're kindred spirits. We like to speak to people of like minds and share our feelings with people of like minds.
What made you decide to start creating content about Blake Lively versus Wayfarer?
It's so funny because nothing I did before was ever remotely like this. I don't follow celebrities. For the longest time, I was
Mm.
working on the Murdoch case. That was a heavy, dark topic. The other series that I was doing was called Dying to Be Loved. And I'd only done about 3 of those because when I was covering the Murdoch case, one of the things that kept coming up was people saying, I don't think he did it because he loved his wife, he loved his son. So
Mm.
I looked up the statistics of how often husbands kill their wives and how often parents kill their children. And I was absolutely mortified at those statistics because in this country, 3 of us are killed every day by a partner or ex partner. Every day. In the world, it's 10.
Mm.
And then every day, on average, 1 child is taken out by its parents. And so I was just absolutely stunned.
Mm.
So, again, with that theme, knowledge is power, I thought in everything in life, we have disclaimers. We have these warning labels. If something could potentially injure you, you're notified, you're warned about it. And that's how you know not to die. But there was no one out there telling women that 3 of you are being done away with every day. You need to be safer, especially in certain situations in your life, like when you're getting ready to leave a man, for example. That's one of the most dangerous times. So, um, I thought women need to hear these statistics. They need to see what the red flags are that led up to these kinds of things happen. Most women are a little bitty paragraph on page 30 of the newspaper. No picture, no story of who they were, just another man killed his wife, la da 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 da. Maybe 3 paragraphs at the most, and that's it. It doesn't even really make the news anymore because it's just so common. So I wanted to do a series where I found women who were victims of this kind of problem.
Mm.
I wanted to find their picture. I wanted to honor their life. If they were a mother, how many children did they have? What did she love about life? Whatever I could find to just honor her and tell her story so that other women could listen to the story. And like I said, if they saw red flags that came up in that woman's life and then they look at their own life and go, "Oh, maybe." Because normally women go, "Oh, no, no, he couldn't do that. He'd never do that to me." So with the knowledge that this happens this often, and then maybe those red flags being brought to their attention like a disclaimer, maybe it might save somebody's life one of these days. But those 2 topics were really heavy. And at the time, I lost a cousin and sorry, I'm the emotional content creator, so I'm always crying. But then I lost another one. And in my family there were 4 of us on my mom's side that were born the same year because her and her sisters had their kids together. So a lot of us are like that. But 4 of us were born in the same year, and 2 of them were from my year. And it was such a weird feeling, and I couldn't get past it. And then I recorded all my content back then. And I would sit down and start to record. I would have it all written, I would have it all ready, and then I would try to do it and I would just start sobbing because there's so much tragedy in the stories that I was telling. And um
Mm.
so I took a few weeks off and then I still couldn't do it. And so I thought, I saw this case and I thought, oh, this will be easy. I'll look at this for a couple weeks and it'll come, it'll go, it'll be a news flash that will just die, and I'll just cover it and do that instead. I didn't really know the people. I knew that Blake was married to Ryan Reynolds. I'd seen her movie The Age of Adeline. I didn't know much about her at all. I'd never even heard of Justin Baldoni. And because I lived in China for such a long time, there was a lot of things that happened in the world and people, celebrities, TV shows, things like that, movies. I didn't know them. And so I thought this was going to be something light, something carefree, something that wouldn't be hard emotionally for me. I could just do this for a couple of weeks till I got myself together, and then I could go back to my regular content. Then I started reading this case, and that justice seeking part of me just that was it. I was so into it. These I call them David and Goliath type stories where you have like a weaker person and then you have the mighty person, and the weaker person is just being stomped on and very little ways to fight back, and the powerful guy always wins. And so with that in there, and then just seeing the lies and the false accusations bothered me so much. And I felt like I had to speak out because it was wrong. And we were all over at my parents' house. My sisters were there and they're all diehard Swifties. So naturally they took Blake's side. And um my first impression was I support women, so I had believed Blake. I thought someone that famous wasn't going to risk their reputation by saying something like this that wasn't true. I didn't expect somebody to do that. And so just you read this New York Times article, it was so shocking. You read her complaint. It was so shocking. And then I started reading all this other stuff and I was like, oh, you're not the victim. You're the monster here. And you're the one that harmed so many people. How dare you do this? So that was it. I was really hooked on the story. And what I started to say about my sisters is that they all believed Blake. And I realized that mainstream media was failing and it wasn't getting the truth out there. And a lot of people were believing what mainstream media was saying. That was all bought and paid for by Blake and Ryan. And I'm like, okay, I have to do what I can do to get the truth out there. I will eventually go back to the Murdaugh series once this case is over. But once I got involved in this case, I mean, there was just so much happening all the time. There wasn't enough bandwidth to cover this case and that case. So but that kind of got put on hold. So that's how we got here. Me looking for a silly celebrity squabble that I could talk about because it's not dark. Wouldn't make me sob into my microphone, something light to go over and then move on.
I am surprised half the time that it
Mm,
has escalated to this level. It I feel like it should have been resolved, but it's interesting when money and power and ego and pride kind of
mm.
clash together. Um, so the first question from our audience is from Beauty at Sunrise. Wants to know, how did you become so knowledgeable about the law?
Once upon a time, it was my first career path. So I changed and pursued education for different reasons, but maybe mostly for my emotional well-being. I saw attorneys at the firm where I worked at, they would just have to swallow things and move on. And I have trouble doing that. I admire people who can keep going and keep the fire and keep the passion in spite of a system that the right person doesn't always win. Sometimes it's for a stupid reason, but that's what it is. That's what we have. So there are so many miscarriages of justice every day here. And that would frustrate me. Like, I feel like that would kill me. So I ultimately switched and I became involved in education. And I pursued that because to me, that's a joyful career. You give all day long, every day, and you give people things that they are going to take with them for the rest of their lives. It's going to be meaningful. It's meaningful that you can do that. It's very, very fulfilling. I also love to create things. I love making things, and I could really express myself with that. The stuff that I did at my jobs have been so much fun, especially when I worked with little kids. It was pure joy. So I don't regret the change. Sometimes I think, oh, I wish I had gone a little further with it, and then I would be more prepared to pick it up again if I wanted to. But I'm drawn to it. I feel happier though, I have to say, as a content creator, because I feel like we're doing a lot, just bringing awareness.
The next question is from Sharon5538. Would you be willing to share some of your research tips and suggestions with us if we are interested in also trying to do our own research on other legal topics?
I actually really love this question because it's something that I always try to show people when I do my lives. The first thing that I do and what I recommend people do when I get a new motion to look at, I'm excited. It's like a little present. I go through and I highlight the case law that they've put in there, and you can Google that. So when you look through the motion and you see they quote a case as an authority for the point that they've just made, you can just copy and paste from the motion and Google it. But it's better if you don't use regular Google. You can use Google Scholar and you'll get better information, more inclined to like actual law. It's easier to find cases. But you can use regular Google too if Google Scholar is a little weird for you to operate. But if you want to look up a certain type of case that's like what they're talking about, you can do that. You can use Court Listener. You can narrow down cases by the judge or by certain keywords. You just put in those parameters and you can look them up. And I highly recommend doing your own research for these kinds of things. So that's one of the big things that helps you understand why the judges rule and what they use to help them rule by looking up cases that have been decided in the past, and it's called case law. So they have these opposing sides. One side writes a motion and says, well, it should be this, and here's the case law that says so. And the other side comes and says exact opposite and says, this is how it should be, and here's the cases that say so. So the judge doesn't just sit there and go, yours sounds better. He's supposed to go through that case law and look up even more for himself. And he's supposed to start, since this is federal court, the highest court on the federal side of things is the U.S. Supreme Court, so he should always start there, find any kind of binding authority, any decisions that they've made, and then he has to base his decision on that decision. Next is the U.S. Court of Appeals. He would check that. If there's binding authority there, he has to follow that. And if not, if there's no binding authority on what it is that he's deciding, then he can choose just looking at other, what they call persuasive, which is like other judges in his district, the same level as him. He can even go outside the district to help him make a decision. Looking at past decisions that have already been decided, especially in higher courts, tells you how the case should go, tells you which side of the law is correct, or which party is on the right side of the law, I should say. Then federal rules, you will see those often in the motions. So when these motions mention a rule, like the federal rules of procedure, that's what we covered for most of all of this. Now we're into the federal rules of evidence, but I look up the rules, and they can too. Cornell has a really good website that has all of the rules, and you can search them there and you can see what they say. The best thing I suggest for when you're looking up the federal rules, because they're kind of basic, they don't go into long explanations. So underneath there are notes, that have been added, and they give you all kinds of additional information that helps you see how those laws need to be applied. And coming then when you have all of that, then you read the motion, is this motion correct? Does it follow the rules? Is it compatible with previous case law? And then so a lot of times I'll look up even my own cases to see. But I get really into the law nerd stuff. I love it. I love that kind of stuff.
The next question is from Lacey, who's a Bocce bestie. She says,
Mm.
unfortunately, you were one of 107 really, content creators subpoenaed by Blake Lively. Are you comfortable sharing the emotional and financial toll of that? Also, what outcome you would have preferred other than the decision of the judge as moot for the
Mm.
consequences on issuing these types of subpoenas? What would that be?
I really liked this question too, as you know, and I have spoken extensively on my channel when I was going through it especially, and I think for all of us, it was very, very emotional. It didn't have a financial toll on me personally. I know it did on others who did hire attorneys, but I wrote my filings myself. But emotionally, it was very difficult because it was scary. It was scary. I mean, when these law firms,
Mm,
one of which had taken part in Van Zandt, which tells me there's no bottom there. They're willing to do things that they shouldn't do. And somehow they got away with it, which is just crazy to me. Well, they got away with it so far. And then I was more afraid of Blake and Ryan than I was even their attorneys, because I think that they are vengeful, vindictive type of people. They don't like to lose. I had learned some of the stories of what they were doing, what they'd done to other
mm,
people. Just seeing what they did to these other people after what they did to Jennifer Abel. These are the people that want to access my information, and the information that they asked for just to get the subpoena in the first place was a lot of information. But if they had gotten that information from that subpoena, that where they could subpoena me directly, what more would they have asked for? It's crazy. And because that subpoena wasn't directly to the one that went to most of us, didn't go directly to us. It went to Google. Then like Perez and Andy and Candace and Megan Kelly, those went directly to them. They're known. They have contact information out there. But ours was like, first they were trying to subpoena Google and then get our information and then, I don't know, subpoena us for more things. So one of the things they could have done is depose me. They could have deposed us. And these attorneys are completely doing Blake and Ryan's bidding. I've never seen the likes of it. Well, yes, I have with the billionaire case,
mm.
with the boat case that I cover, but I have a really big family and we're very close and I love my family. And it wasn't just fear for myself. It was this fear that
Mm.
because I chose to be on YouTube, that I could bring harm to them. And it was a terrifying thought because while this was happening, there were people on Reddit that were actively in comments, publicly discussing how they were going to find specifically me and Leanne in real life. They were dangling like a spider in a web,
Oh.
refreshing. They talked about it. Refreshing the docket in California where Google is located, because Google's in California. So that is the proper place that all of this should have taken place. So they knew that there was a chance that we were going to fight it in California. And I actually had looked into it because I didn't want to deal with Judge Lyman. I wanted to do it somewhere else. And California does have better protections, First Amendment protections and stuff. So I was going to do it, but you had to file in your real name. And so I didn't. And I'm so glad because pretty soon I got screenshots from people of, telling me, hey, these people
Mm.
are just waiting to find who you are. And we've seen like Not Actually Golden got doxxed. Little Girl Attorney got doxxed. They showed pictures of her father.
I'm shocked.
It's not okay. I mean,
That was a plot twist. I was not expecting that. You can tell I don't frequent Reddit. I don't want my feelings hurt.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, last I heard, they think I should be in prison. I didn't want my family's pictures next, coming up somewhere on Reddit or wherever. And like they did. It's such disgusting,
Mm.
inexcusable behavior. Like I said, it's not the attorneys I'm afraid of. Ezra probably had no idea who I was. I don't think these people knew who us content creators were. I think we came from a list that Blake and Ryan made. I think they can't stand criticism. They were out there looking to see who was saying stuff, and I think they gave that list to their attorneys. And it was all about shutting us up, in my opinion, intimidating us and shutting us up. And I don't think that it's going to be over when this case is over. I think ultimately when they lose this case, as I'm hoping they do, as we're all hoping they do, they're going to be angry.
Mm.
They're going to be very angry, and they can never take the blame. And I think that a lot of that anger and blame is going to be back once again aimed at us, those of us talking about her that she feels are ruining her reputation. So, and I just get this vibe off of them that they are vengeful, petty, cruel people. So yeah, it was a really heavy emotional toll, and one that's not over. So
How about the whole situation with Judge Lyman choosing to make things moot?
this is why I have issues with him. I already thought something was not quite right. And I've said before, I'm a very black and white person. So when it was discovered that there was a Wall Street Journal article about him, he was only 2 years into being on the bench. And that's not a long amount of time. He had already been investigated, and the investigation had uncovered 13 cases that he should have recused himself on, and he did not. Some of those cases, one of those cases had to be completely retried. All that time, all that effort, all that money that the government had to pay for to redo his case. And it was a long case. It was a difficult case. They had to do it all over again because of this man's hubris, of him not recognizing that he should have recused himself. And it was not only the cost to the government, but the cost to both sides. Both sides, each side had to pay their attorneys. I'm sure it cost them millions to retry this case because this man who knowingly took a case that he shouldn't have taken. And why do I say knowingly? Because he tried to say, oh, that was my wife's stock. I didn't know about it. But when he applied to become a judge, he had to fill out this long application. And a big part of that application is filling out his financial information, every stock he owns. No, he doesn't have to show his property or his cash, but you have to show your stocks because there could be a conflict of interest. There's a potential for that to clash. And like he owned stock in a bank, and then the bank was one of the parties in a case he was presiding over. So that's exactly what it's there for, to protect from this kind of conflict of interest happening. So on his application, when he was becoming a judge, he had to fill in all of those stocks. Not only that, every year after that, they all have to refill in their stocks. They have to list any changes to them. Did they sell? Did they buy? Did whatever. And it includes your wife if you're still married, which he is. So he had to report that every single year. So this man, there is tangible proof. This is not my opinion. There is literal, tangible proof that you can look up his years of reporting his stocks and see that he filled that in every year. And how can this man cannot look at me with a straight face and say, I didn't know I owned this stock. Because I have the proof printed out here in that bookshelf behind me that you did. And the funny thing about this particular stock is before the trial, he had his wife, or they sold it. She sold it. Before the trial. Is that a coincidence? You could say it's a coincidence. Is it? Can you convince people beyond a reasonable doubt that you didn't say, oh, this case is on my docket? I'm going to be presiding over this case. I better get rid of it. You can't. It could be a coincidence, or it could be that. How do you prove what's true here? And it's just the way it looks. So that's why he was investigated. And that wasn't the only time. Like I said, it was 13 cases in just 2 years that he had done this for. And so that told me a lot of information about him, about his moral compass, about his hubris. And then when he dismissed the Wayfarer case, I felt like in that decision, and it wasn't just me, it was there were attorneys that were talking about it that felt the same way. There were even some judges that had something to say about it. And there was some bad decision making there. And there were the hearings we got to hear. And he wouldn't let Wayfarer finish a sentence oftentimes. He'd cut him off. He was rude to them. And then he'd turn around and let Blake's team just babble away. I heard him what I call lawyering for her, where her own attorneys hadn't brought up an argument, and so he brought it up and like fought for her side. It was very, very strange. And so I already had these feelings about him. There was also a situation where there was a question about whether or not Brian Friedman it was when they were trying to decide privilege, and Jed Wallace was part of the conversation. And they said, well, Jed Wallace being in the conversation invites a third party in, and so our attorney-client privilege is lost. And so you have to hand those things over. And Wayfarer's like, but we did represent Jed Wallace early in this case. And Michael Gottlieb said the opposite. And the judge, in spite of having the transcript of the hearing where this was discussed, he just took Michael's word for it over Brian Friedman's word. And it turns out Brian Friedman was telling the truth. And later they showed the transcript. They showed a document, an order by this judge. He should have known. And, you can't remember every little detail, but you're supposed to look it up. And instead, he'd just taken Michael Gottlieb's word for it. And he'd already ruled. He'd made a ruling, put out an order. And they're like, but wait, and you yourself presided over this hearing. And he had to undo it, which was embarrassing. But then when it came to our subpoenas, there is an extra level of protection for non-parties, third parties, whatever you want to call us, because it states in the law that as non-parties, we didn't choose to be part of this lawsuit, that we got called in by somebody, by one of the sides. So we're supposed to have better protection than what the actual parties have. One of those things, and the easiest way to get your subpoena quashed, is to say that you can get this information from a party. If you can get this information from a party, you have no reason to come after a third party. Blake, at that point, had already, in her request for production to Wayfarer, she'd already requested this information. She'd asked them, which content creators did you speak to? Did you pay anybody? Did you send information for them to talk about? There were people to ask. Everybody in the Wayfarer party had been asked this question. There was no need to come and subpoena us as well. Not only that, every court in this country has a jurisdiction. 100 miles outside of your courthouse, you have no subpoena power. That's why, and it just came up yet again when they said, who's going to show up to the trial? Because now that you're no longer defendants in this case, certain ones of them like Justin and Jamie and Steve Sarowitz, there was no need to come. We can't make you come, so we can't subpoena you here. Under that same rule, our subpoenas were not in New York. They were in California. So the correct way to subpoena Google for my information and everybody else's information was to go to a court in California. And to do that, you would have to plead your case in California to overcome our First Amendment right. Our rights to privacy. She would have had to prove that she needed that so much that she would have had the right to overcome my First Amendment right. And there's a two-pronged test there that has to be passed. We saw it with the Stephanie Jones case, but she tried to subpoena Meta. What did she have to do? exactly what I just said. She couldn't issue a subpoena out of New York because it's out of the jurisdiction. They have no right to subpoena anybody in California. So she had to do it the right way. Why? I want to know why. It's the same case. Blake didn't have to do it, but Stephanie did. Why? Because Judge Lyman let her do it. When they tried to subpoena Brian Friedman, and I think I can't remember how that all worked out. I forget so many of the early on stuff. It was out of jurisdiction. That was heard by a court in California because that's what the rules are. But our subpoenas were issued from Judge Lyman's court. Magically, they had power in California, the other side of the country, a long way away than 100 miles. And so here we have Stephanie Jones having to subpoena California. We have them having to subpoena Brian Friedman, and that all has to be done through California. When Wayfarer subpoenaed Taylor Swift, they had to do it from Washington, D.C., where her law firm is located. Perez Hilton fought his in Las Vegas, where he lives. That was the proper jurisdiction for him because his was not to Google, it was to him. Andy Signor, he's fighting it in Florida, which is the jurisdiction that he belongs to. And so that's the correct one. But ours magically had the power to go from New York all the way to California. Everybody knew. It's a federal law that states that that's not okay. 100 miles is as far as they can go. They all knew it, and he allowed it. Not only that, he allowed the same subpoena to be used not only outside of the jurisdiction, but it got to be used for several different platforms. And California's huge, so it involved different courts in California. It's not like California's only 100 miles. So even from California, if you're outside the 100 miles, you've got to deal with a different court. So, but not for this magical subpoena. This one was able to be sent to several different platforms. One went to Google, one went to X, one went to TikTok. It went to people who live in different states all over the United States. It went to people who live in Canada. It went to people who live in England. It doesn't work like that, and they all knew it. And in our responses, we spoke on these things, and he ignored it. He allowed her, and it's called strategic. I forget the phrase. It's very rarely brought up, but I mentioned it in my motion for sanctions. It's something that attorneys do to stop a judge from making a ruling that they don't want to have to deal with. So it has different applications, but in this application, it was this. My subpoena, I was the first one who filed the motion to quash. Her response was due on Monday. So on Saturday, Ezra files a motion and just withdrew it. She knew she couldn't fight it. And I will be forever proud that I beat these multi-million-dollar attorneys with my humble little motion to quash. But she knew that she couldn't fight the law in my motion. And so she said, let's just withdraw it. Why did she do that? It was strategic on her part, because if she had not done that, the judge would have had to rule on it. And he would have had to quash it. And once that subpoena was quashed, since it was all the same one, it would have ruined it for everybody. If he had said, this subpoena is not legally sound, it doesn't operate on the correct authority, it would have died for everybody. And then Henny knew that. And so he didn't. And at the time that I was subpoenaed, there were 43 of us, which already seemed like a crazy amount of people. And I thought, if I can get him to rule that it's not legally sound, I can save everybody. And not only did he not allow that to happen, because he allowed her to withdraw it and then declared it moot, so there was no ruling on this actual wayward subpoena, she continued to use it until it got to 107 people. And everybody knew it was not a legally sound subpoena. So I actually get my feelings a little bit hurt. I shouldn't take it personally, but I can't help it when people jump to his defense. Because I want to say, you didn't go through what we went through. You aren't a victim of Judge Lyman. You can defend him, you can praise him, but you haven't sat where we sat and dealt with what we dealt with because of him. And it does. It honestly, it hurts my feelings a little bit, because they saw it happen. They saw what happened to us, and they knew it wasn't right. And they say one of the defenses about him is, oh, he's so procedural. That's why he does this. He's being so procedural. He wants to do everything by the book. He wants to be thorough. Why didn't he do that for us? If he's so procedural and so by the book and doesn't want to make any mistakes in the law, why did he not do that for us non-parties? I don't understand. I don't understand it. And the motion for sanctions that we filed, it wasn't just a motion for sanctions. We asked for protective orders because we found out after ours were withdrawn that Andy Signor, they had attempted to subpoena him on 3 different platforms. So we thought, we're not out of the woods yet. There are still other platforms we're on. So if we got this one withdrawn, but what's she going to do? Is she going to go to Instagram? Is she going to go to X? Is she going to find another way? So we didn't feel safe. We asked him to grant us this protective order to say that she could not try to subpoena us on any other platform so that we could feel safe. But he ignored it. There was no reason for him not to grant us that. Why? We're non-parties begging for mercy, and he couldn't even respond. He finally, just not long ago, responded to Ken's, but not all the rest of us. There were a lot of us who filed that. There was myself, Leanne, Lauren, Ashley, Ken's, I think also Sweet and Salty. I can't remember who else. But and I even told him in my motion for sanctions, I've not provided my name to the court, so I can't even get money from you. I don't want money. I didn't lose money. I just want a ruling. I want the court to say this is not okay because it went beyond just us. And like I always say, every single decision that's made in a court goes beyond that case. It can be applied to, it makes a record that can be applied towards future cases down the road. And I feel like this one is one that has a potential to hurt more women in the future. People can look and say, oh, well, Judge Lyman allowed this, so I can subpoena these people and get this information. And it's such a dangerous precedent to start. This subpoena was dangerous. What it was asking for, it was trying to take away our First Amendment right, which is so important. It was a very, very important situation. And if they allow the First Amendment right of people to just be overcome so easily, that is a very, very dangerous thing. I just don't understand why he would not grant us that protection that we asked for. If he's so procedural, if he's so by the law, if he's so by the book. So from now on, any content creator could be subjected to this type of subpoena again because he didn't rule on it. There's no ruling against these subpoenas. They were withdrawn, and so he considered our motions moot. So from here on out, and I feel like it will always be women, just like it was in this case, any content creator can be subpoenaed. And they could say, well, Southern District of New York, the largest federal court in our country, allowed this, and it can be allowed. So I always think, how many victims will there be of this kind of backdoor law? We know that in this case, there were at least 107. The last time we were given a number, that's what the number was. How many will there eventually be? Because this man was constantly praised and defended for being procedural and by the book, did not do his job. He's created a horrible situation. And it sickens me that inside this very case, we had Stephanie Jones, who had to walk the line. She had to follow the rules. She had to file in California when she was subpoenaing people through Meta. And when Wayfarer subpoenaed Taylor Swift, it went through Washington, D.C. That was a different type of subpoena, but it was still following the jurisdictional rules. It didn't come out of New York. And we all saw his reaction to that. The way he jumped up and was ready to fight for her. Sua Sponte took a filing off his docket that was a response to what Blake's team had filed and couldn't be bothered to even rule on our motions. They're still sitting there. The only one he's ruled on was Ken's. Ours are still sitting there. Not ruled on. Why? Why didn't he grant us the protection we asked for? We were non-parties in the case. And I wanted to protect my privacy because I was stalked in the past. That's why I'm careful. I never want to show my face. This is a filtered face over my face. It's a feeling that you can't describe. To know that somebody was watching you that closely. I have protected myself in every way that I know how. And this judge, this procedural judge, refused to protect me. I filed twice before my stuff ever made it to the docket. There were 2 that were refused. He said the court would not entertain anonymous filings, that I had to either use my name or give my reason to the court of why I should be allowed to file anonymously. And we were up against a deadline. We had so many days before we had to send that we had filed these motions on the docket to stop Google from giving our information to her. And so it was so stressful to have sent it twice, been denied. And people thought I was disrespectful. And the way I talked to him was so awful. How can you speak to a federal judge like that? This man did not do his job. He allowed this subpoena under the authority of his court that was not legally sound to be served on me and all of us when it should have been shut down. In regular discovery, attorneys can write subpoenas without court's approval or even telling the court they're doing it. They have to give copies to the other side so that everyone can be fairly represented. But this particular kind of subpoena is not like that. This subpoena through a third party, when you're seeking someone's identity through a third party like Google or X or Meta, you have to show cause to the court in the proper jurisdiction, in the jurisdiction where that third party is, in order to even receive a subpoena. There's a 2-pronged test you have to overcome that's built around the First Amendment. So it's very difficult. And he didn't make them do that. He let her write on her own just some subpoena out of New York that has no power in California, but he let her do it. And then he wouldn't let me. What I was trying to protect was my identity. And he was telling me I had to expose my identity to even file a motion. Like, how does that make sense? It doesn't make sense. But he let her bypass what the government has arranged for people like me. And he let her do it under the authority of his court. And so by the time everybody saw my angry, venomous words, he had already denied me twice. This was my 3rd time, and I was not going to let this happen, whatever it took. I have friends back in China, and one of my friends I made the president of my company. They felt safe in China, beyond his subpoena power. So I made them the president of my LLC, and they allowed their name. So I put that name, and these crazy people on Reddit, again, call themselves lawyers. They started saying, oh, in Chinese, that means blah, blah, blah. No, it was somebody's name. And their name was put on my LLC. And they're like, oh, we can't find her LLC. I changed the name of my LLC. I shut one down and opened a new one. I am not a fool. I know how to keep myself safe. And then someone else filed as a Jane Doe, and he accepted it. And so I filed again and requested to do it anonymously, and he accepted it. And that's what I used to file my my motion for sanctions. But it was crazy to be asked to give up my privacy in order to fight for my privacy. And that's why I said, how dare this court? When this court forced me to tell them why I needed protection, it wasn't my choice. I felt violated all over again because I had no power. I was powerless. I either had to tell them or let them subpoena my information. So I had to give this man my story against my will, and it was infuriating because he is not a person that I would choose to tell. But I had to. I had to risk Blake's team getting a hold of it, Blake getting a hold of it, Ryan getting a hold of it. These awful, horrible people that violated Jen Abel, these backdoor attorneys that doxed how many people on this docket so far? And they'd already done plenty of it. And that's what we were afraid of. It was sickening. And it was so wrong. So yeah,
Mm.
the emotional toll was huge. It still is. I still have fear because these are vindictive, vengeful people, in my
Mhm.
opinion, and they're going to lose this case, in my opinion. And when they lose this case, it's going to be somebody's fault. They already say that we influence the jury, all of us content creators. And I just don't feel like it's over or that I'm safe. And it's disgusting that the man whose job it is to have protected these third parties, he's told this in the law put forth by the federal government to protect third parties and non-parties. And he didn't. And then people say he's so procedural. He wants to do everything by the book. He just follows the law. No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't. He's protected Blake far too much in this case instead of other people that should have been protected. And the rest of the question, what I wanted him to do, I wanted him to rule on it. I wanted him to actually quash it, not let her just bring it back, withdraw it, not get a ruling, not just for my sake, but for everybody else's sake, and anyone in the future who his decisions will affect in future cases. And I wanted him to do what he did to Brian Friedman and Kevin Fritz, who didn't do anything near this atrocious. I wanted him to tell Ezra that what she did was wrong, to admonish her like he did them, because this was wrong. I didn't want money. I wanted him to rule on the subpoena.
I will say that I was one of the people that would say that Judge Lyman is just procedural, and hearing the pain in your voice and hearing your experience, it does make me go, I'm probably gonna stop saying that. I
No.
because I'm not out here trying to hurt Cassidy, and I'm not out here trying to hurt like other folks that were really harmed by his decision. I mean, again, I'm a non-lawyer. Maybe it's probably my desire to not believe anybody's corrupt or any of those things. That's probably what, is part of the reason why I'm the way that I am. But it does give me pause about making sure that if I don't understand, to not even say that
No,
because I
everybody has a right to their own viewpoint of him, you know? I appreciate my right to have my opinion. I don't like when people criticize me for it, so I don't criticize anybody else for it. It's just those are the reasons why I feel the way that I feel. And um if people want to continue to believe that about him, that's okay. I'm not going to get mad at anybody or hold a grudge or call anybody out.
yeah, well, I mean, there are very good reasons. So the next question comes from Kimberly White, who's a bocce bestie. Wants to know, how were you able to fight BL's subpoena and win without revealing who you?
So this one I kind of already answered in that really, really long answer to the last question, that my first two attempts didn't work, and I'll never forget his words that the court will not entertain those filings. And so then, like I said,
Mm,
I saw that somebody else on the docket filed and requested to file under Jane Doe status. And even though I had already filed my motion by then and she had withdrawn it, just in case there was going to be something else that came up, I didn't know if that was going to truly be the end of it, if there was going to be another platform. And then we had already talked about wanting those motions, those protective orders. And so I went ahead and asked for Jane Doe status and got it, and then used it from then on. That's what I used to file everything else in the court.
mm, okay. I was wondering if like there was a winning because I remember you saying things were like mooted. So I was like, is that a win or is that a?
It's technically not a win, and that's what's so frustrating
Mm,
about it because it seems it wasn't a lose either. It wasn't a lose for her either. That's why it's considered strategic. That's something attorneys are not supposed to do. Every
mm,
single one of us that filed a motion to quash, that's what she did. She just reached in,
mm,
pulled it back out, let the judge rule it as moot. She would pull
mm.
it, withdraw it, it'd be moot. She got to keep reusing it that way. And so that's how she avoided a ruling because once she did that, the subpoena was still good and she could use it.
So the next question is from X terrestrial. And the question is, do you do anything differently now than you did on your channel before the subpoena?
I would say so. I was
Mm,
starting to become a little bit more open. I might have even considered at some point going on camera. Um,
Mm, with the camera?
and we actually recorded this initially with me off camera, but it just seemed so like it was missing so much. And so I've been brave and put a filter on and came on and did this. But altered my face completely.
Mhm.
But I think I was getting too comfortable, and that reminded me not to ever do it again. Don't ever get that comfortable. I think it closed me up a lot as far as people's access to me, and I know that sounds it comes across differently than I mean it, but I have to protect myself and I have to protect my family. So it's not like I think anybody who reaches out to me is just trying to sort something out about me. It's not like that. It's and it's not like I'm accusing anybody of anything, but there's always pause, and there's always the reality that we don't know who people are on social media. And that goes both ways. People don't know who I am. They might know more about me than I know about them
Mhm.
because they've heard me talk enough
Mhm.
and I've shared enough. They don't see me, but they hear my voice. They've been able to observe my personality for well over a year now with this case, but we don't actually know each other on here. So I've really cut off access about DMs because I don't know about you, but I get a lot on Instagram and Twitter. So I prefer to keep everything public, and I I try my best to respond to every comment I can on public channels and just leave it at that. And
And it takes
um,
energy.
it does. It really does. And you know, some people don't understand it. They get their feelings hurt, and there's seems to be no way I can explain it right. But I think most people understand that. But I mean, it's hard to just keep up with the comments on YouTube. I used to be able to get to every single one, and it's been a while now that I just couldn't because there's so many documents to read. I do so much research for each episode that I do, and then it takes a while to do that, so I don't always get, and I have more subscribers than I used to, and we all know each other now. I mean, as much as you can know in these situations, so we enjoy talking to each other, and so there's a lot more comments than there used to be. I don't always get to it. I've put up a lot of boundaries just this year. It's probably the biggest effect is though that it I really closed up personal access to me. Um, yeah.
Understandable. You gotta make wise decisions that, protect you, even if there's some folks that might not understand. Hopefully, most people do, though,
Yeah.
especially if they know that history behind why you're protecting yourself.
Yeah.
Um, the next question is from Julianne 089. Will you still consider making the official complaint about Ezra?
I would like to, but here's the issue. I think you have to put your actual name to file a legit complaint. I don't know if you
Mm,
could file it as Jane Doe. I kept waiting. I have the thing written. I've had it since last summer.
mhm,
But I kept waiting for him to rule on my motion because then I could take his ruling, and if he did rule in my favor, it would have more weight to it, but he's avoided it. So
mhm,
I haven't been able to do that. I've considered filing a letter or something to the court and say, "Hey, you missed our motions. Could you please make a ruling on these?" But I don't know if I want to deal with him anymore. If I could find a way to file the complaint about Ezra, though, where I don't have to reveal myself because it's the last thing I want to do on a complaint about
mm,
Ezra Hudson in California, where that weirdo supposed Reddit lawyer is, where she was refreshing the docket, just waiting for me to file there. So I'm not going to put myself at risk to do it. I would really like to do it. Um, we'll see. It's still I'm still kind of like hoping at some point he does make a ruling on things. Um,
mm.
yeah, because that would give it more weight.
The next question is from Bonster1.
Mm.
What has been the biggest surprise in the Blake Lively Wayfarer case so far?
I was thinking about this. The I think, and this kind of goes off the case itself. It's not really pertaining to the case, but I think one of the biggest surprises to me overall is that as finding out the truth about journalism, that was probably the biggest surprise and biggest disappointment. Seeing us get down to the truth of the filings and then seeing mainstream media either just straight up ignore it or just directly
Mm.
feeding out of Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively's hands from the New York Times article. I mean, that was unbelievable. The New York Times, for heaven's sake, just sold their souls and put that out there. I still can't believe that. And then they've all just ignored the truth of the filings of what's really happening. If anybody bothers to write anything about it, it's not even true. And then there's also something silly. I guess it's to find out the truth about Taylor Swift was a little bit hurtful in a sense. I called myself a Swiftie. I wasn't the kind that was like tracking what she wore at a concert or where she was or anything like that. But I did watch some of the documentaries that she'd made, like the one when COVID was going and until she recorded in her own home, that kind of stuff. I would hype myself up like with some of her songs, like the song The Man, where she's talking about if a woman does something and a man does the exact same thing, the woman's a slut, the man is the man, that double standard. And I love that song. I love the beat of it. You could dance to it. I could hype myself up to it when I needed energized to do something. And there's another one called I Could Do It With a Broken Heart. And that one is such a fun beat. And I liked the message that she has in there for people that, yeah, your heart might be broken, but you can do it. You can do what you need to do. You got this. And so I kind of miss that. And I had held on hope that she wasn't actually involved for the longest time. And then we had the great unsealing and we saw her messages and they were so disappointing. They were not nice at all. The stuff she said about Justin, the stuff she said about her own power and the power she gave to Blake for just by letting her use her song. And yeah, it it's a little thing. It's a stupid thing. It doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, but it was a surprise. It really was because I thought she was a nicer person than that.
Mm.
Not that I know her personally or she has any big effect in my life. But I think probably for a lot of people, because a lot of people really like her. And yeah,
Yeah. I would never say it's silly
yeah,
because
it's true.
she has a strong fan base. She affects
Yeah.
economies. Yeah. So I mean, uh, and that happens because people related with her. So I would never say silly. I think sometimes I think
Hmm.
people feel things for reasons. The next question is out of ideas. How did you feel about Blake and
Hmm.
Ryan's and their legal team's hypocrisy of going after content creators for expressing their opinions after Ryan said you can't sue
Absolutely
over hurt
disgusted.
feelings?
Absolutely disgusted. The hypocrisy of this case has just been astronomical from the very beginning. All of the stuff, and I was looking through today because I was looking for pictures of Blake for something that I was doing. And what came up in the pictures, because it was just a Google search, were tons and tons of TikToks. And they were consistently across the board back from that time. There were TikToks of girls putting on like 6 layers of shirts and pants and beanies and making fun of what she was wearing. And it was legit criticism from people that had nothing to do with Wayfarer. And they were talking about her clothes. The criticism that she was up against was her being, as people felt, miscast as
Mhm.
Lily Bloom, and then her marketing. None of that was about her actual person. It was stuff that in the grand scheme of things doesn't even matter. And then to come at Justin and attack him on such a personal, life-altering way. Because regardless of how this case ends up, there will always be people who believe that he did this. And you will not be able to change their minds. He will always have this feeling over him. And Jamie as well. Jamie's not as public of a person, but he will always, I mean, I feel like they will live the rest of their lives with this shadow. Um and the girls the same thing. It's
Mhm.
destroyed their reputations. They work for the kind of work that they do. So even the non-parties, like Brianna and Katie. And so to me, like the way they respond to things is 1,000 times worse
Mhm.
than anything that happened to them. So it's even beyond hypocrisy. It's like you didn't just do the bad thing that you said someone else did, but you went 1,000 times worse. So with and it was your hurt feelings that made you do it. I don't think it was the attorneys that came after us content creators. I don't think it was their
Yeah.
idea. I don't think they knew who we were. I don't think they cared who we were. I think Blake and Ryan sat around searching who was talking about them. And because people say like that they do go to Reddit and stuff, that they even think that Ryan has accounts there, and I can believe it. They're not filming movies right now. What else are they gonna do? So, but I think that whole thing was over their hurt feelings about what us content creators say about them, and even that they can't take it. There's just so much hypocrisy.
So the next question is from Faye Andy. It says, did
Mhm.
Blake ever manage to find out who she is outside of the Costco subpoenas?
If she did, I don't know.
The next person says is Stickbat9 said, how did you find the immense strength needed to stand up to systemic injustices you have personally faced during the
Mm.
Lively versus Wayfarer case?
The thing about me, if you want to hurt me or attack me, it's pretty easy. I'm not good at defending myself, but if you come after somebody that I care about or somebody that seems um not weak, but weak in comparison to who's coming after them, I can be ferocious. And that's what it was. I was seeing other people cry because they'd been subpoenaed. I was hearing their worries. We did make a chat there. There were multiple chats. I was only in one of them, and the one I was in just had 3 other people because even that I was still being very cautious. But I separately messaged a few other people like Shirsty and Ken's and Sweet and Salty. But then there was one chat that was the 4 of us, and we ended up working on the motions together. And we were pretty open about how we felt. And I think when I saw these other people, just that protective part of me, that protective part of my character, that when I feel someone needs protecting, I just change into someone altogether different than I normally am day to day. And I think that was the strength that I was doing it for other people. And on my bookshelf, behind me, um, besides of all the files, there's Lady Justice with her scales. And it's to remind me of what she represents. She's not blindfolded because she ignores facts. She's blindfolded because she doesn't see, oh, you're a celebrity, you're wealthy, you're powerful, compared to the other person. That she's blindfolded because she sees them, they're equal. They're equal to her. She doesn't cater to one and not the other. And then I have a gavel, the little judge's thingy. But that is what motivates me for all this stuff. If it's wrong, it's wrong. If it's unjust, it needs to be fought against. And that's what it was. Had I been the only one subpoenaed, I don't know what I would have done, but I wouldn't have had the power and the strength that I had, that I got because there were other victims.
Ralph 1833 wants to know, does Kassidy have anything in the pipeline post this lawsuit and the Murdaugh?
I do. I kind of already talked about this a little bit in a previous question too, that I still have to go back and finish the rise and fall of the Murdaugh. I call them the Murdaugh Mafia because I got tired of them being called the Murdaugh Dynasty. I'm like, with the dynasty, there's a measure of what's the correct word? Not honor, but you think of it as like a ruling class when you say the word dynasty, and they weren't that. So I call them Murdaugh Mafia. I want to finish that series. And then the case that I told you about, Dying to be Loved, about women, that's an ongoing situation. And I feel like it's very, very important. I've also, I bought several books about the Peterson case, Lacey Peterson.
Lacey?
Yeah, Lacey. There was one that was written by either his step or half sister. I can't remember which. There was another one, really thick one, written by a true crime author, and then one written by Lacey's mother. And I can't remember if I have a 4th one as well, because I was gonna do like a really big deep dive into that story. I will probably continue to do that Dying to Be Loved story. But to say for sure what I'll be doing, when I look at a case, it can't just be, well, this is the big case that's out right now. If it doesn't speak to my heart, I have no interest in it. I can't stay interested. If I'm not interested in something, I can't hyper focus the way I need to. So if I like it, I can sit here at my desk researching for 20 hours without eating, drinking, anything. And that's what it takes for me to care enough to devote that much time. So to be able to tell you right now, a case that I know that I'll be interested in, I'm not sure. I was kind of looking at that Hawaii case um,
Mhm.
that just finished up a little bit ago. I might do that. But in the Dying to Be Loved story, the last episode that I did was about Suzanne Simpson. I'm going to follow that one. I did so much at the beginning of it, and I want to see it through. Um, I just want to honor her and her story and her daughters, her 3 daughters that were left behind.
Next question is SS Web 4003 wants to know, if you had to choose one place to visit in a lifetime, where would it be?
That one has no answer. I love traveling. I want to go so many
Wow.
places. I've already been to most of the places that I had like my lifelong dream of going to. But I haven't seen everything there is to see. So like this past winter, we spent a couple months in Germany,
Mm.
mostly Germany, but other parts of Europe. And we followed the romantic road, and we didn't get to go to all of the stops. So I still have some to finish up with that. But I also want to do a river tour of the Rhine. There's a lot of like castles along the way up mountainsides and stuff. It's beautiful. I've gone through big parts of England, mostly London, though. I'd like to see other parts of England. I've done big parts of France,
Goodness.
mostly around Paris. I've been through most of Belgium, parts of Italy.
Taiwan.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
I've um
ah,
I've only stopped there. I've only been to the Taiwan airport, but I've been all over other parts of Asia, China, Japan, Korea, but I'd still like to see Singapore and Malaysia.
yeah, no, it's a
Yeah.
fantastic place. I got to be there for
Oh,
7 days. I
nice.
wish I was there for at least 14. It's kinda like, aside from Japan, I loved, Taiwan's public
Mm.
transportation, and I always say public transportation changes lives because it just
It
opens up
really
the world to you.
does. It really does, and you could kinda tell a country by its public transportation. I know the one in Hong Kong is
Mhm.
really, really
Good
efficient.
one, good one.
Yeah, the one
Amazing.
in Japan is really good. We are really behind on public transportation here, that's for sure.
And they're learning to be more accessible. There's more elevators
Mhm.
and things of that nature that I saw.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. 36 wants to know, what is your
That's
favorite
a really
dish?
hard one. I'm a foodie, and I love to cook too. Um, I like to make really fancy dishes, and for a while before I started doing the legal stuff, I was gonna do a thing where I could take pictures of the food in different countries I was visiting, and then come home and try to replicate it. And I did start doing a little bit of that actually, and I've had some really fancy food. I've had some not fancy food. I've had all different types. I love street food, but if if I really had to boil down to one, it's not a fancy meal. Um, it's not like a Michelin star, but it is chicken fricassee from a certain restaurant in Paris. It's so delicious. I love French food. I love European food, just about everything. Now, England, which they after Brexit, I don't know if they consider themselves Europe, but they're Europe as a continent. It doesn't have a whole lot of fancy food like the other places. They've got their meat pies, which are great. The pastries are really flaky and delicious on those. They've got their fish and chips, which I always eat when I'm there. But like Germany, France, other places, the food is just so good. And what I love about French food is
Mm,
that it's so rich. Their butter, my goodness, best in the world. Uh,
mm,
Possibly tied with Irish butter, but they use so much cream. They're not shy about it. And this chicken fricassee is just swimming in cream. And they put lemon thyme on top of it, like fresh lemon thyme.
mm,
And I'd never had it before I had it on that dish. And I've had other types of thyme. And so I tasted that and I was like, I had to ask the waiter, what is this? What is this taste? And so he told me I've been growing it in my herb garden now, but I'll have to post a picture of it later. But then of course you always get the baguettes with everything you eat. They have different flour than we have. So the gluten content is different. So their baguettes and their croissants, they melt in your mouth. Where like ours, the ones that are made here, they're kind of a little bit rubbery. Do you know what I mean? Like when you bite, it kind of like pulls, stretches just a little bit. But theirs is just like, you just bite and it just like melts in your mouth and it's so good. But this chicken fricassee, um, yeah, it's the lemon thyme on top. It tastes like kind of like lemon zest, like with this fresh herb taste to it. I don't know, but they serve it with green beans and potatoes and the baguettes, and it's just delightful. And I've actually learned how to make it. I found a recipe, worked with it over and over till I got it just right. And I've made it for some friends, but every time I go to Paris, I go to that same restaurant.
Nice. I've never had that. I don't even know what it looks like.
It's delicious. I love it.
The next one is from Lauren, and she wants to know, do you ever stop making pie?
I will never stop making pie. But you know what's fun?
Is that an inside thing?
Yeah. Well, I made a few shorts of me just like cooking or making hot chocolate, something like that.
Mm.
And I did a pie and yeah, it's kind of a joke between us now.
I mean, are you going to New York and you make her a pie?
I've thought about it. I've thought about it. Yeah. But what's funny is that I don't really like pie. I like to make it. I like to get the crust right because I really love the crust. But like if it's apple, cherry, blueberry, peach, none of the fruit pies because I don't really like cooked fruit. I like fresh fruit. And oh my goodness, I eat so much fruit. Just fresh. But my grandma used to make pies. Since I didn't like any of she made all of those that I just said, like apple, cherry, blueberry, peach. But since I didn't like them, she always made pumpkin pie for me because I love pumpkin pie. That's the one I like. So, but I like to make them. I'll make them and give them away. I just like it.
Well, that's probably better for you in the long run. Like, it won't be tempting to consume it all or
Yeah.
something.
I do like the crust, which is probably the worst part to eat because it's got the most fat in it. But I don't like the mushy fruit.
The next question is Theone, a Bocce bestie. Have you ever listened to the tape cassette audiobook by Janet Ivanovich, One for the Money?
No, and I saw this question earlier, and I meant to look it up to see what it was about so that I would know what she was talking about. But it's not familiar to me. I don't think I've ever heard of it. It sounds interesting. Maybe I will. I do have Audible, so I can when I finish the one I'm listening to now, I could maybe listen. But yeah, I don't know what that is.
So the next question is Whitney in the Garden asked, have you ever considered reading audiobooks or doing ASMR?
I actually have an audiobook on Audible. I do. It was written by one of the jurors of the Murdaugh trial. So she co-wrote it with another woman who is a teacher in South Carolina. And she would come in my chat and back when I spoke on the Murdaugh case, and she ended up reaching out to me and we talked a little bit. She would get some of her information from my videos and stuff. It's under Kassidy O'Connell, and yeah, it's just me narrating. So it's pinned on my post on X. So if you follow me on X, you'll see it's my top post.
That's good to know.
Yeah. And ASMR, I don't know that I would actually do that. I have talked about doing some of the old books that no longer have copyrights, the public domain books. I thought about reading some of those because some people have said they like to fall asleep listening to my stuff. But sometimes I get kind of feisty when I'm talking about the case, and that might wake people up. So I thought if I read some of these old books, just putting that out there for people to fall asleep to, Or some people have said maybe I could do some affirmations. So I've thought about doing that. So who knows? I always have a million ideas and not enough time to do them. So yeah.
I hear that. Okay. So the final question is from Al_Ainsley that says, "Do you think that Ryan Reynolds is mad that Ryan Gosling is a much more talented and much more popular
This one
potential husband?"
cracked me up the first time I read it. Ainsley, I recognize Ainsley from my chat too. I'm sure that Ryan is mad at everyone who is more talented or more handsome or more anything than he is. He just strikes me as that kind of person. I think him and Blake both are. It's so funny because Blake made this post one time years ago. I forgot where I saw it. I laughed so hard because she was talking about how she loves Beyonce and Taylor Swift because they don't feel intimidated by other women who are powerful. Like she's talking about herself, like she doesn't intimidate these women. And I'm thinking, girl, what kind of universe do you live in that you think you rank up there with Beyonce and Taylor Swift? As far as Ryan Gosling goes, because I thought that Ryan had done the Deadpool dance himself. I found out during the course of this trial that it was somebody else that was hired to put on the little costume and do that bye 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 dance. Um, which is so funny to me. And I still think he did that because of Justin's Backstreet Boys thing. But Ryan
Pop
Gosling can
Club.
dance. He could sing, he can act, he's cuter.
Hmm.
He's all of the things that
Yep.
Ryan is not. Yeah, so and I mean he used to sing and dance with
He's
Britney
all
and
stars.
Christina and on the Mickey Mouse Club. Yeah, Justin Timberlake. But I saw in that latest interview of Ryan that he did for the Sunday Today Show that he's been Botox to the hilt. I took a screenshot of it because like the very center of his forehead looks like they missed a big spot right in the middle. So there's like this weird creasing when he raises his eyebrows. It's so funny. I'll have to put it in one of my lives because I did screenshot it because it looked so weird. But the rest of his face is all of a sudden all smooth and shiny. His eyes look a little bit bigger. Yeah, it tells me he's been reading all the comments about how
I don't know.
we've been talking about how he's aged since this lawsuit. He's aged like milk left in a trunk in August, is what I always say. Yeah, it's a lot.
It's wild. I was looking at pictures.
Mm.
I'm like, whoa. That's what guilt does to you. Well, Cassidy, they're gonna have a twofer. They're
Well, the
gonna
two of us have the
they're gonna
longest
have
lives,
this
so
regular one that they're watching right at this moment, which is the 17 questions with Bocce version of this, and probably I was gonna say a bonus cut, but it might just be like almost close to unedited cut, where it's like I might cut out a few things, but it's still pretty much gonna be probably like in order to get it all out is probably gonna be the uncut version, you know, minus a few things. Anyways, with that said,
yeah.
the final question for you is what platforms can people follow or support you on?
So, of course, YouTube. I'm also on Instagram, X, and Blue Sky. I don't know how many people actually go to Blue Sky anymore, but I am there as well. So, yeah,
Mm,
I always forget about it too. YouTube, Instagram, X, Blue Sky. And it's the
all right.
same everywhere.
That if there is anything that you enjoyed thoroughly through this whole 17 questions with Bocce, feel free to like this video and subscribe to me if you haven't already. Follow Cassidy, subscribe to Cassidy if you have not done so as well. Okay, have a great one, everybody. Bye.
Thanks for having me. Bye.